Well, good evening and welcome to lesson number 6 in the class titled Journey of the Soul. Very disappointed that today's the last lesson. I cannot believe we have already gone through 5 of these critically important and unbelievably informative lessons. But here we are, the last week. And for this course, of course, is going to be another course entitled This Can Happen. And that is mainly focused on what's going to be when the Mashiach comes, the coming of the Messiah. What is the Jewish view on that? And so it's also guaranteed to be a fascinating class. So we're starting that class April 26th. So Monday, April 26th for 6 weeks. The class, This Can Happen. You should be receiving emails and mailing about that to be able to sign up for that as well. With all hope and prayers, by that time, by the end of April, we'll all be in person, with maybe vaccinated already. Who knows? I mean, truth is that over the last couple of weeks in synagogue, we've seen so many more people coming back and they're coming to the in-person service. It's really beautiful to see. Just full house this week and last week. It gets bigger and bigger every week. And we're not at the pre-COVID numbers, but we're close to it. I can say with our preschool, we actually have surpassed the pre-COVID numbers. More kids have signed up for preschool than before COVID. So we're really excited about that we're seeing some very positive change in the community and around the world. Finally, people are feeling better, not as afraid, getting the vaccination or whatever it is that is causing people to finally come around. But today's lesson is titled, Life is Short-ish. How Death Informs Life. In a few minutes, I'm going to post the PDF for today's lesson online, just in case somebody still needs it. I think everyone on here should have the class or the PDF. If not, let me know, let Nick know, but I'm going to wait till everyone comes up this way. We'll have minimum distractions. Okay, so up until now, we've come to appreciate death as the next phase in our ongoing personal missions. Now, final lesson, we use what we've learned to revisit our priorities in this current phase and find ways to fill every minute with everlasting significance. This is very important because it's very easy to come to the conclusion after these weeks of discussing the afterlife and the soul and the primacy of the soul and how the body is only a vehicle or a tool to assist the soul in achieving its ultimate mission. It's very possible for us to think that this world is really unnecessary or unpopular or even really a thing that we have to do in order to get to the afterlife. And we could accidentally, or we could potentially think or underestimate the impact or the power of the world that we live in, the days that we live in today. And that's really what we want to talk about, is that the time that we are living right now is unbelievable. Every minute that we have is a gift, and every minute that we have should be cherished and utilized to its maximum. Now, that does not take away of the infinity of the soul, doesn't take away of where and what we are trying to accomplish, but it's certainly, hopefully at the end of today's lesson, we will understand the importance of tackling every day and every moment. So let's begin on page 210 in the student book with a little exercise. And you've almost completed the journey into Judaism's approach to death, afterlife, reincarnation, etc. Take a moment to identify 3 ways that the perspectives we gained can influence our life and its daily realities. So now that we spoke about reincarnation, or what happens after we die, the journey of the soul, where it goes, all these things, now that we've spoken about this, can you identify 3 things, or 3 perspectives we've gained, and how it influences our life today? Because at the end of the day, we want to make this class very personal. It's about us, right? That's really what it's about. So how do I apply today's lesson to us, to my own life? Today's lesson in Journey of the Soul. I'm trying to share the screen here. For some reason, the screen the way I wanted to share is not sharing. So we're going to go this way. And we're going to see if this one will work. There we go. Okay. All right. So up until now, we've learned that the soul is real and is eternal, right? And this is why we spoke about that there's no need to fear death, and how the natural and humanly instinctive fear of dying is mitigated by the Jewish perspective on life and death. When we understand that the soul lives on forever, there's really nothing to fear. It's eternal. We also spoke about how the body is a temporary container for the soul, that in order for the soul to maximize its potential, it needs to go through this specific journey of coming down to the body. And even while it's here, the soul eventually does not want to leave, but ultimately the soul recognizes that this is simply a container housing the soul, but the soul is the most important thing. And we also spoke about how the soul experiences great pleasure back in its native habitat. That once the soul passes on, it is actually going to live this blissful and uplifting life like never before. Yeah.
Some people are having trouble opening the PDF. It's requiring password.
Yes. Okay. So if you have a problem opening PDF, no problem. Send me a request permission, and then I will open it up. I see you already did. A few of you do, so I will respond to that. Okay. Hold on. Oh, you also did, Jim. Okay, Jim. All right. Okay, Ami, you should have access. 1 second. Sivan, you should have access. And Mona. And
there it is. I got it now, Rabbi Deutsch.
Excellent, Jim. Okay.
That's working.
All righty. Technology. What would we have done without technology? Unbelievable. Okay. Okay, Mona, you got it?
No.
All right, she's coming your way. You know, I was sitting next to this guy in the plane,
Right.
and he had his laptop open, he had Wi-Fi, and he sends an email, and he's getting frustrated that I was taking like 10 seconds, you know, to get to the person. And why didn't they get it already? I'm just thinking with 30,000 feet in the air, and you can send a message to someone else across the world. You know, 5 years ago or whatever, 10 years ago, that couldn't happen. But today, when something doesn't work our way, we get so impatient about it. It's like, it didn't happen right away. What are you talking about? How could that be? Anyway, I think everyone that sent me requests should have access now. Is that correct? Mona, you got it? Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Jim, you got it? Okay. All right. I like that. Okay. I like yeses. All right. If anyone else, just let me know, please. Oops, sorry. Let me get to that. This guy. Okay. All right. Back to today's lesson. Someone sent a message. What was it?
Oh no, it was just
Okay. Right. So why is thinking about death crucial to living a life of meaning. This is something we must address. We understand now, based upon what we've been talking about, that there's life, there's death, there's the soul, there's a body, there's the current life, and then there's the continuation of life. But why, as human beings, are we so obsessed with this discussion of death? And I know we started off the course by asking this same question. And in lesson number 1, we addressed this question one way, that in fact, when we think about death, you really have nothing to fear about death. When someone is about to die, they're not afraid of death. So this question is a little bit different. It's not why are we afraid of death, but why do we even think about death? And at the end of today's lesson, I hope to discuss a fascinating idea that the truth is, our ultimate goal really is to abolish death completely. Yep, exactly. Find a cure that we should never die. But first, can you identify any benefits to occasionally contemplating our own mortality? Is there a benefit to talking about death and thinking about death? So in fact, recent studies have shown that there is a benefit to contemplating one's mortality. One benefit can potentially be that it helps us prioritize and retain focus. It keeps us goal-oriented. We don't lose track. If we're going to live forever, I can push things off for a year, 2 years. When I invite people to join us on our trip to Israel, which is coming up very shortly in March 2022, people say, oh, don't we go in 10 years from now, whatever, I'm not ready yet. But no, so when we think about our mortality, we say maybe now is a good time to come. Another thing is when we think about mortality, we say, I do whatever I can to avoid foolish mistakes. It's very possible that we do things that we may regret, but because our mortality is so near could even mean 60 years away, hopefully 80 years away, whatever it is, still we want to avoid as much as we can. We also, by us embracing this idea or thinking about our own death, we say, let me take advantage of every moment that I have. I don't have that many moments left. I don't have that much time left. So I have to take advantage of that. Hopefully, I will also live my life more freely and fully. And finally, when I think about my mortal self, I think about how to take advantage and to live a more meaningful life. Not just survive another day. As I've shared many times, I had a teacher and he used to ask us, he says, are you alive because you were not hit by a Mack truck, or you're alive because you're alive, right? In other words, are you full of life, or you just happen not to have been killed? That's why you're here today. Yeah. So this is a very important question. I know it's a very potentially depressing question, but think about it. It helps add meaning to our life, that we're not just surviving or functioning, but we're actually thriving and making a difference in how we live our life. So let's begin with text number 1. Now that everyone has the text in front of them, we'll ask Abra to please read with text number 1. Page 211 in the student book.
There is no exercise or reflection as potent, perhaps, as contacting one's ending. In confronting our own passing, we are better able and more willing to help others see the power of awareness of that which is inevitable, death, helping us to wake up to the tender colors of life and personal creation. In contemplating our own end, we recognize that there is still time for life in whatever time is left. Values are there to be lived until that last inevitable moment. To acknowledge this is freeing.
So this PhD, this doctor, Dr. Walser, says that by us contemplating our end, we live with increased attention, we're less prone to taking risks, and we have a greater eagerness to obey the laws or obey rules. In other words, it keeps us in check and it keeps us focused. But there has to be something much more meaningful than just that. It can't just be a tool or a device to help us live more meaningful. There has to be something that has greater meaning to it. So let's understand the Jewish perspective. From the Jewish perspective, occasionally contemplating our eventual passing has multiple benefits, as we see in text 2a. Ami, you want to read, please?
Sure. 2A.
Yeah. Page 212.
212. From the Jewish viewpoint, occasionally contemplating our eventual passing has multiple benefits. Let's extrapolate them from the following texts. Be agitated and do not sin. Verbalize within your hearts, upon your beds, and forever, and be forever silent.
I said, the Talmud explains in text 2b, says like this: we should always agitate our good inclination against our evil inclination. As it is stated, be agitated and do not sin. In other words, we have to recognize our good inclination, our bad inclination, and we have to decide which inclination, who are we going to follow? The Talmud also continues to explain, if this vanquishes the evil inclination, all is good. But what happens if that's not enough? Then we should occupy ourselves with Torah study. As it is stated, verbalize Torah teaches until they enter within your hearts. That sometimes it's not enough just to contemplate over it. By us saying it repeatedly over and over, it enters into our heart and we begin to live this way. If it does accomplish that, then we begin to live that way, great. But what's if not? The Talmud continues, we should recite the Shema prayer, as it is stated, upon your beds. Saying the Shema will once again penetrate and have a internal impact on our behavior. If this does so, good, but not always does it. So what should we do if it does not? Then we should remind ourselves of the day we die. As it is stated, and be forever silent. The last resort is to remember that you are simply a mortal human being and you will die. This certainly will shake you to your core to remind us that we better live in a positive manner. So contemplating then our eventual death helps us prioritize and remain focused on what's really important and of lasting value, which is eternal. Not on that which is here today and gone tomorrow. This in turn leads us to avoid foolish mistakes and choices. Bill and Randy every year would go together to the state fair. And every year Bill would turn to Randy and say, you know, Randy, I wish we can take that helicopter ride for $10. And Randy would always say, it's $10. And $10 is $10. And every year they would go, and Bill would tell Randy, we should take that helicopter ride for $10. And Randy would say, it's $10, and $10 is $10. After going back to the state fair for 15 years, the pilot of this helicopter heard once again this conversation. And he says, you know what? I'll make a deal with you. I'll let you both come up onto this helicopter and I'll give you a ride, but on one condition, that you don't say a word. If you say one word, I hear one word out of any of you, it's going to cost you $10. Okay? So they go up on the helicopter and the pilot starts to make all these maneuvers, goes up and down, around, sideways, flips over, all these things, and he doesn't hear a sound. He's trying to go fast and slow, you know, going this way and that way. Finally, they land. He turns around to Bill and he says, Bill, I can't believe it. You know, did all these maneuvers. Sure, one of you guys would scream in fear. You guys did not say a thing. So Bill says, I know, it was really hard, especially when Randy fell out. I really had a hard time being quiet. So he says, why? Randy fell out. He says, yeah, $10 is $10. So we're all aware of where we're headed, but that fuzzy awareness alone does not do the trick necessarily. We occasionally need to reflect on an idea in order to truly stay focused on what is truly meaningful and valuable. So let's watch this short little video here. Oh. 1 second. Yeah.
Dynamite, from the ancient Greek term for power, is a potent material.
Could you hear? Can everybody hear?
But a person can hardly encounter a more powerful motivator to plan for his day of death than the opportunity to read his own obituary in the media. Alfred Nobel was a 19th century
Could you hear?
Swedish chemist and engineer with 300.
No, you can't hear?
They're saying they're through the external computer speakers, so it's just
Oh,
so maybe the
okay. So
audio.
yeah. So let me try this again. 1 second. My bad. I know what I did wrong. I know what it is. I'll correct it. Okay. Bingo. I didn't click that. Okay. All righty. So let's start this again. Oh. 1 second.
Different patents.
You hear now? Thumbs up if you can hear.
Dynamite, from the ancient Greek term
Better?
for power, is a potent material indeed. But a person can hardly encounter a more powerful motivator to plan for his day of death than the opportunity to read his own obituary in the media. Alfred Nobel was a 19th
Susan, you able to hear? Okay, good.
century Swedish chemist and engineer with 350 different patents. He owned 90 factories that manufactured armaments and was the inventor of dynamite. His brothers Ludwig and Robert Nobel were tycoons with oil fields along the Caspian Sea. Alfred invested in his brother's enterprise and he grew ever wealthier. Then, in 1888, Ludwig Nobel died suddenly while on a visit to Cannes, France. The passing of one of the Nobel magnates was exceptionally newsworthy. In their haste to hammer out the headlines, the French newspapers misidentified the deceased, mistakenly reporting that Alfred Nobel had died. Alfred was shocked to read of his own passing. He was deeply disturbed at the far from flattering obituaries. Bold black headlines screamed, "The Merchant of Death is dead." The fine print was no better. Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, died yesterday. Alfred was sobered by an experience afforded few. Is this how I will be remembered when my time comes, he wondered? Will I be forever tainted as the merchant of death? Historians speculate that Alfred, determined to improve his genuine obituary by improving his lasting effect on humanity, took steps while still hale and hearty to ensure that mankind would remember him as an everlasting contributor to the advance of civilization and quality of life. On November 27, 1895, Alfred Nobel signed his last will and testament, designating 94% of his vast fortune to the creation of the Nobel Prizes. To this day, his name is synonymous with the advance of science, medicine, literature, and world peace. All it took to transform a merchant of death into an angel of progress and peace was a moment of serious reflection on mortality and its consequences.
All right. So sometimes it's hard to look past our own daily activities and the things that we're involved in. Many times we even convince ourselves that what we're doing is very noble and should be celebrated, even though others don't see it that way. And there are times, therefore, that things have to happen to us that all of a sudden causes us to realize what we are actually doing and how we're viewed, and potentially the negative impact that we may be making, even though we don't see it on our own. And therefore, there are things that happen to us, potentially can happen to us, like in this story, that can shake us to the core, and therefore we make a decision to change. There's been a term that has been coined, and that is the obituary life. Basically, you're asked, what would you like your obituary to read? And that should motivate you to live a more noble and a more uplifted life. So it's not so much about the obituary, really. It is more the idea of us dying. So this idea of death then should lead as a motivator to live a more meaningful and deeper life. There's a term that is used in America today called YOLO. You know what YOLO stands for? You only live once. Anyone over 20 doesn't know that, because this is really a very woke and millennial term, because that fits perfect with the millennial and woke lifestyle, which is all about me. Not necessarily in a negative, but that's just the reality. So you only live once, meaning to say, let me just have a good time, let me skydive, let me do whatever I can, because who cares? This is my only chance to have a blast. But then you ever think about, true, you only live once. Maybe this is why you should live a meaningful life and a purposeful life and a goal-oriented life. But the YOLO term is almost like the bucket list, which is, I guess what was the Generation X maybe had the bucket list term. We say, before I die, before I kick the bucket, essentially, I have to fulfill all these things. But again, what is these things that we have to fulfill? Rarely is it, well, I have to help out this person, I have to make this contribution. It is usually I have to go visit this country, or I have to do this ridiculous act, or things like that. And so this idea of having a bucket list or a YOLO lifestyle, in a way, is not so far from Judaism. It is just a polar opposite way of Judaism, meaning to say that this idea that this life leads to another life, and we're here, is true, and we have to maximize the life, are both the same. The only difference is that the bucket list or the YOLO mentality is, let me therefore just hang loose and do what I want to do. Where the Jewish perspective is, as a result of that thought, how can I make a difference in the world? How can I live a more impactful, a more meaningful life? You understand the difference? So that's a very fine-tuned difference between the two of them. And so to emphasize once again, all this is contingent upon the ability to be able to take moments, our life that we live, and consider our mortality with equanimity and without undue dread. And this will lead us to living a more meaningful and uplifted life. In other words, let's not be scared that we're going to die or be afraid of dying. Let's embrace this idea that it will happen. But how can I maximize the time that I still have here on earth? In fact, I've been to many bedsides, the last moments of someone's life. Sometimes literally the last moments, sometimes the last weeks. And I usually ask a question, which I learned to ask that question from a nurse that would ask this to her patients. And in fact, in the appendix in the student book, you can see this article that this nurse wrote. And she would ask the patients, and again, like I said, I asked this question also, what was the most meaningful moment in your life? What are your biggest regrets in your life? The most meaningful moments in the life, I have yet to receive the answer going on a certain vacation or making this big purchase or skydiving or something like that, or bungee jumping. It is usually my most meaningful moment is time I spent with the family. I was able to not work so hard and come home from work at a decent hour and be with my wife and my children, spend time with my friends. These are, and the regrets that I get is on the same line. The regret is that I worked too hard, worked for too many hours, I didn't have time to spend with my friends and so on. Because ultimately, we as human beings recognize that the life that we're given is a gift and every moment should be cherished. As I've shared before, my children reminded me again this week that the past is history. The future is a mystery. The present is a gift. And no, that's why it's called a present. No, so there's a now is a gift, and that's why it's called the present.
Yeah, it's today's a gift.
There you go. Today's a gift. That's
Yeah.
why it's called the present. Thank you. There you go. All right. So when we speak about the end of life, then we're not talking about it, as I mentioned, to put fear, but it's really to help us focus on what our goal is. Let's watch one more video. We'll watch a meditation video, and then we will continue with today's lesson. This one. Oops. There we go.
For our meditation reflection for this final course, we're going to take a meditation straight from our sages, from Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, which tells us to meditate upon three things. Imagine, if you will, that there's an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all of your deeds are written in a book. Now, that's something that for centuries would have taken imagination. But in our day and age, it doesn't take any imagination at all, because we know that everything is seen, heard, and recorded. What we're going to do now is imagining ourselves at the end of our lives in the editing room, so to speak, with all the footage, all of the film, all of the recordings, every moment of our lives. It's there for review, to rewatch, to relive. Imagine yourself now looking back through your life, watching the real-time movie of every single second. See yourself in every place where you've been.
Could you hear it? Can you hear the sound?
Every person you've ever met, even if you passed them in an elevator for 5 seconds. And now, let's start to edit and form our highlight film. And of course, what does a highlight film mean? Now that the soul has left the body, the highlights are not which restaurants I ate at or where I went on vacation. The soul now has moved on from a body. The highlights are, what good did I do in this world? Who did I love? Who did I help? Start to imagine your life. Start to reflect on the real highlight film. Those small fleeting moments that were over in seconds, but last forever. Who did you affect? Who did you help? How did you make the world a better place? And now realize that we're not editing just yet. We're still filming. We're still making the movie. Imagine yourself now, you're still filming the movie. Visualize it. You're in the director's chair. What scene will you direct? We'll take a moment to visualize and reflect.
So now let's take another perspective and let's move on. So now that we understand how we have to see our lives and attempt to maximize it, we also will now see how we have to take proper advantage of every moment. If I were to ask you on page 214 in the student book, which do you consider of greater value, your time or your money? Or if I were to ask you, are you living life in a manner that is consistent with the answer that you just provided? Yeah. Now, I'm sure everyone is thinking, for sure, my time is more valuable than my money, right? Most probably that's what everyone's thinking. But I will challenge you. How much time do you spend in the supermarket or on Amazon.com, or hopefully you're going on smile.amazon.com where Chabad gets a little extra gift from your purchase. But how much time do you spend online or in the supermarket agonizing over a price difference that maybe is 50 cents or $1? You could spend 5 minutes searching for a better price, and you may find a better price by 50 cents. Was those 5 minutes worth it, right? I went to visit a Jewish guy in prison a couple of years ago, and I asked him, I said, why are you, what do you do? And so everyone in prison is innocent, of course, but eventually, after going many times, he told me that he had a business, and he would charge people's credit cards. And all he did on every purchase, he added $1. Who's going to call up the merchant for $1? How many times were you overcharged? And you say, you know what, my time is more valuable than calling up, spending a half hour with the merchant. And it happens to me all the time. Don't overcharge me, please, because I'm not going to bother. But it happens to me all the time. And I got a charge from Google. I know it was $2.99. And I said, am I going to call these guys? I'm going to be on hold for 45 minutes for $2.99. It's not worth it, right? So you hope that the government will look out for the little guy like me. But the reality is that companies do this all the time, knowing that the customer is not going to bother to call up and try to figure out what the problem is. And if sometimes it's $30, it's not worth your time to do it, right? Because time is so valuable. And so you have to ask ourselves, what's more important, time or money? Let's see text number 3 here. Susan, you want to read, please?
Yes. Folks fret over a lost dime, but fail to fret over lost time. But money provides no reprieve, while time is impossible to retrieve.
You all know the famous comedian or the famous scholar, Borscht Belt scholar, Jack Benny. And he says he was once walking on the street and someone came over to him and said, your money or your life? And the guy says, hurry up, hurry up. He says, I'm thinking, I'm deciding, give me a second. Right? So time, money is fungible, time is not. Certain things we cannot exchange for other things. One of those gifts that we're given is the gift of time. Human beings also cannot be exchanged for another human being. A can of soup can be exchanged. I can give you a can of soup knowing I'm going to get the exact same can back. Not the exact same can, but a can exactly like that. That is precisely like that. Or a bag of pasta or whatever it is. But people or money are not changeable. In fact, I'm reminded of the story where this young couple had a baby. They're so excited, they finally had the baby, everything's great. They bring the baby home and the wife opens up the blanket and turns to him and says, this is not our child. The husband says, I know. He says, what do you mean you know? He says, don't you remember when we were standing at the entrance of the hospital and you told me to go change the baby? So I went up and I changed the baby. So people and time are not exchangeable, not fungible. Therefore, every moment that we have ultimately is a gift, and we have to live and use it to our maximum. In fact, let's see text number 4, please. Kay, do you want to read, please? In other words, if time is so important, then why do we care more about money than about wasted time? So let's see text for you. Unmute yourself, page 216.
If not for our fear of the angel of death, what wrongs we would commit against our Father in heaven. Let us learn from the first 10 generations of humanity. God showered them with abundant paradise-like goodness, including centuries-long lifespans. Yet they were on the brink of destroying the world.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Here you have a generation that has able to live for so long, yet, unfortunately, they didn't take advantage of it. In fact, as we're going to see now, the generation of Adam, they lived for 800 years, 900 years, 1,000 years. Yet they see that instead of living their life to the fullest, too far. There we go. There we go. Okay. They wasted their time. Why? Because they saw life as being so long that they have plenty of time to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And so one of the consequences for avoiding our mortality is the focus on selfish desires and aspirations. I will take care of my family soon. Now let me first take care of myself. There's no rush to take care of the needy when I can first take care of myself. So death then frames the importance of life. But if we have plenty of time, then time is also dispensable. Why is now this hour so important? Also, it can lead us to procrastination. I have plenty of time. There's no rush, right? When a teacher gives a student an assignment for a month from now, how many students do it right away or wait for the last minute? When you have a lot of time, you end up waiting for the last time. But if you're pressed for time, then you end up taking advantage of it. Also, the discussion from what life is truly about. This disconnection, from what life is truly about. When we have the ability, or when we do live for a very long time, it can also potentially distract us from our true mission. Again, if we see ourselves as having another opportunity or another year, another 5 years. In other words, if somebody would tell you that you are going to live till this and this day, this is your final day to live, will you live your life differently than if you did not know how long you have left to live? If somebody says you have another 50 years and 3 weeks, you know the story with I've shared this before. This guy was hired to be a docent in a dinosaur museum. And he says, this dinosaur, he tells the tour group, is 300 million years old, 2 months, and 8 days. Everyone in this tour group was amazed. He says, well, how do you know the exact year? He says, oh, very simple. When I was hired, they told me that this dinosaur is 300 million years old. And I'm working for a month, 3 days, and 3 hours. So this, I know exactly how old it is. But so if we know exactly how long we're going to live, then we may push it off. But because we don't know the day we're going to die, therefore, life is more precious. Every minute is more precious. In fact, let's read a fascinating story. This story is by a young boy who's 15 years old, and his name is Miles Levine. And he unfortunately was diagnosed with a rare pediatric cancer. And let's see what he wrote over here. Catherine, can you read, please?
I went to the driving range the other day and I was thinking how you start out with a big bucket of golf balls and you just start hitting away carelessly. You have dozens of them. Each individual ball means nothing, so you just hit. One ball gone is practically inconsequential when subtracted from the bottomless bucket. There are no practice swings or technique reevaluations after a bad shot because so many more tries remain. Yet eventually you have to reach down towards the bottom of the bucket to scavenge for another shot, and you realize that tries are running out. Now with just a handful left, each swing becomes more meaningful. The right technique becomes more crucial. So between each shot, you take a couple of practice swings and a few deep breaths. There is a very strong need to end on a good note, even if every preceding shot was horrible. Getting it right at the end means a lot. You know, as you tee up your last ball, this is my final shot. I want to crush this with perfection. I must make this count. Limited quantities or limited times brings a new precious value and significance to anything you do. Live every day shooting as if it's your last shot. I know I have to. I found out today 5-year survival rates are 30%.
This was in July 2005 when he wrote this, and unfortunately he passed away in August 2007. So we see that the bottom line is life is too short to hold grudges. Life is too short to worry. And as he says, limited quantities or limited time brings a new precious value and significance to anything you do. Live every day shooting as if it's your last shot. I know I have to, Miles says. So we see a fascinating insight into how he viewed his life. Unfortunately, he learned the hard way. He realized how short is remaining of his life. We many times believe that we're immortal, and that's fine. We think we're going to live for a very long time, and that's great. We should think that. But at the same time, we have to remember that every moment is very precious. There's a mashal. A mashal is kind of a story that has a lesson to it. There's a story that is told of a young man who heard that in a distant island, there is diamonds that are covering the streets. Wherever you go, there's diamonds everywhere. He was determined to get to this island. And so after many months of planning, he comes to this island and he sees that everything that they said about this island is absolutely true. It is covered with diamonds everywhere. And he's so excited. He starts to fill his pockets with diamonds, 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 in every single pocket, in his shoes, in his socks, in his everywhere he could find, he put some more diamonds. Now, after a whole day of collecting diamonds, he's a little hungry. So he goes to the restaurant and he orders everything on the menu. For me, for everyone in the restaurant, eat, no, all on me. When it comes to pay, the waiter gives him the bill and he says, no problem, here. Hey, here's some diamonds and keep the change. So the waiter says, dude, on this island, there's diamonds everywhere. We don't pay with diamonds. Diamonds have no value. He says, oh my goodness. I just ate to my heart's content and I paid for everyone else. So he says, what's the currency over here? So the waiter says, over here, the currency is spoiled schmaltz, like chicken fat, bad spoiled chicken fat. He says, what? He says, how do I get that? Well, the waiter says, listen, if you want, you can work off your pay. You ate all this food, you work in the kitchen till you pay off your bill. So the man has no choice. And so he works and works and works. And he starts to advance and grow in the restaurant and in this one industry and the next industry. And he makes a lot of chicken fat and a lot of schmaltz. He's becoming very, very rich. And he's one of the richest men on the island with the most schmaltz, the smellier, the better, the more worth it is, the more expensive it is, the smellier the schmaltz is. Finally, after many years of living on this island and amassing a wealth of this schmaltz, this chicken fat, it's time for him to go home. And so he sends a letter and he says, I've been on this island, I've become very, very rich, and now I'm coming home. And so he takes all this chicken fat, piles it onto the boat, and they start to travel home. And everyone in the city is excited. The Moshe, who used to be a shlomazel, now is very rich and he's coming. But as his boat is coming closer to the shore, it starts to stink. And everyone starts to leave the shore because no one wants to be next to something stinks, horrible smell. And they're leaving, everyone's leaving except for the families waiting for this Moshe to come with his wealth. Finally, Moshe comes off the boat and he's so excited, he's smiling, he's touching, fixing up his suit. And everyone, the family's holding their nose. What did this guy bring with him? Man, he says he's rich. This place stinks. And Moshe says, so look, this boat full of schmaltz, full of a chicken fat. They said, chicken fat? What? It stinks. He says, well, why'd you bring chicken fat? He says, what do you mean? That's the currency on the island. They said, currency, you went to get diamonds. You came back with chicken fat? What, have you lost your mind or something? He says, oh my goodness, you're right. I totally forgot. I went to get diamonds. And I got so sidetracked because that's the currency. I forgot to even bring home diamonds. His family says, you have no diamonds at all? Nothing? He says, no. He says, actually, maybe. And he starts to dig in his pocket. Finally, he finds a couple diamonds. And with that, he was able to live for the rest of his life. But we learn from this is a mashal. This is an example for our life. We're sent in this world. And God says, you have a mitzvah. You have time that was given to you to fulfill good deeds. But we get so caught up in the green. We think, oh, this is so amazing. This is so valuable. The more green I can get, the bigger my safety deposit is, my account is, the richer I am. We forget that what's real wealth? It's the mitzvahs, the good deeds that we do, the kindness that we bestow upon someone else. That's the real wealth. But here we think we're going to come to heaven with all that chicken schmaltz. All it is, it's going to stink. Really, when we come, the mitzvahs, that is what's valuable. And so this brings us to the next section. Many times we work for many, many years and we work really hard. And there's nothing wrong to work hard, provided that, of course, as we mentioned, our family doesn't lose out. But sometimes we reach a point and we say, it's time for me to retire. And what does Judaism say about retirement? So let's look on page 220 and see what is this idea of retirement. When the Lubavitcher Rebbe turned 70 years old, the Rebbe said, in honor of my 70th birthday, I'm going to establish 71 new institutions. When he was 70, the Rebbe said, now my life is just beginning and I'm going to start fresh. I'm going to start new. And we're going to start to conquer the world, which is really what happened. From the Rebbe's 70th birthday till he passed away in 94, Chabad grew exponentially. So what is the idea? How do we see this idea of retirement? Sivan, you want to read please text 6 on page 220?
Sure. Rabbi Yoshua stated, those who were married in their younger decades should nevertheless remarry in their old age. Those who had children while they were young should continue to have children in their older years. So it is stated, sow your seed in the morning, and do not withhold your hand in the evening, for you do not know which will prosper, whether this one or that, or whether they will be equally good. Rabbi Akiva stated, those who study Torah in their youth should continue to study in their old age. Those who had disciples in their younger years should continue to have disciples in their seniority. So it is stated, sow your seed in the morning, etc. You want me to continue, or that's the end?
That's it. In other words, if something is good and worth doing, continue doing it. If we lived a life of meaning and purpose, continue leading a life of meaning and purpose. Why stop? There's plenty of time to relax in the afterlife. This life is worth working for, accomplishing, and for achieving. Now, it doesn't mean that one should slave away their entire life if one sees their work as such. But what it means is we should not retire from life. The word retire comes from the words retire. You have a bad tire, you have to get a new tire. That's what it means. It doesn't mean throw out and don't have any tires because you still need a drive. Just get a new one, an updated one, right? So that's the idea. Maybe we reach a point we want to end or finish the career that we've been doing and whatever it is, but we should continue to live on a new way, not retire from life. But we have to be productive. In fact, I know many people who have retired, but they're busier now than ever. They're busier because they're doing good things, productive things that they wanted to. They wanted to contribute or add to society, not just sitting back in their beach house and doing nothing, but they're actually being productive. In fact, it's the most painful thing for me to see. Especially during COVID, there were some people that I know that unfortunately either were forced into retirement or retired because they were kind of at that point anyway in their life, and they spent the whole year, this past year, being really, in my humble opinion, unproductive. And this has not turned out to be good for them, not psychologically, emotionally, mentally, nothing. It has not begun. So I always tell these people that I talk to, I say, fine, I understand you're not working anymore in the place I used to work, but you can still be productive. Why don't you write or lecture? You have so much knowledge of all the years that you worked. You have so much you can give to a young generation. Mentor someone, but use your time wisely that you can still contribute. You don't have to, do what you were doing in the office, but you can do so many other things with your vast knowledge that you've accumulated in the 50 years that you worked. Don't let that go to waste, but you can be productive. In fact, in figure 6.1 on page 222, you can see the difference between men and women in these different categories. It's a little small, but basically the point is that while a person is working, they are much healthier emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and in almost every area of life. When a person stops working, unfortunately, many times we become less productive or less healthy, and we start to decline. And so therefore, whatever we decide to do, we have to remember that even though we may be, so to speak, like I said, retiring in quotation marks, we are really simply adding new tires and starting over again. As we know, when someone is elder, they can be volunteer. You can be a mentor for young kids, for teenagers. And in fact, one of the greatest things that I've done over the years with our teen group is I've invited some people who have retired from certain careers, and I've asked them to come and talk to the young professionals or to the volunteers and give them some insight into the working world and being productive and making a difference in the world. So you can volunteer, you can mentor. These are some ideas. And of course, we can study Torah. We can join together, travel in learning programs and do things. In fact, today, which I think is a great thing, many universities are offering classes for retirees. Why not? It's a beautiful thing. Spend your time learning, growing, learning a new language or learning a new subject that you've always interested in learning. But of course, the most meaningful thing is to learn Torah. When a person learns Torah, not only does it expand your mind, it also expands your soul. It also expands your spiritual psyche. And this is a benefit for our mental, emotional, and spiritual health. Let's now turn to text number 8, please. Who didn't get a chance to read yet? Luba, you want to read?
Oh, I can't read. I lose oxygen.
No problem. Okay. So who else is there? Let me see here. Second. Kay, did you read today? Oh, you read it. I think you read it. Yeah, you read. Yeah, right. Sarah, you want? Please read text number 8, page 223.
I don't have the text in front of me, so I can't do it.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry.
Oh no, you have the text.
If the elders advise you to destruct and the youth to construct, heed the counsel of the elders. Because destruction upon the advice of elders is constructive, and construction upon the advice of youth is destructive. Is that what you wanted me to read, Rabbi?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. You know, Steinberg and Fleischer had a very successful garment business, and they sold leather jackets. But after many years of their successful enterprise, things started to go south. And one year they ordered 10,000 leather jackets, and they could not even sell a single jacket. At the end of the season, they were stuck with all this inventory. They didn't know what to do. After all this, they invested so much money, and this inventory can literally lead them to the brink of bankruptcy. They're very stressed. And at the end of one stressful day, all of a sudden this man walks in and he says, I'm looking all over the place. I would like to buy leather jackets. Do you have any leather jackets? So Fleischer and Steinberg says, yes, of course. How many do you need? He said, well, take whatever you got. They said, we have 10,000 leather jackets. He says, great, 10,000. That's exactly unbelievable. And so they sit down, they negotiate a price, and they sign the contract. But this Australian buyer says, listen, before we actually ship out the things, I'm going back to Australia tomorrow, and I have to speak to my partners to see if they agree on what we just agreed upon. And so if you don't receive a telegram from me by Friday, then you can ship out the items at the agreed upon price. And so Tuesday passes, Wednesday passes, Thursday passes, there's no telegram, they're feeling good. Thursday comes, they're still feeling good, they didn't hear a telegram. Friday comes, now they're very nervous, the last day, they're hoping not to get a telegram. And comes 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, they're starting to breathe. 5 o'clock, they're about to close the shop. All of a sudden, they hear a knock on the door. Their hearts sink. They open the door and they say, who's there? They say, telegram. They say, oh my gosh, telegram. And so Fleischer opens up the telegram and he stops for a second. He says, great news. Steinberg, your mother just died. It wasn't a telegram from the Australian buyer. That's anyway, so it's just a joke. All right. So let's now go to a very important subject. And that is, we've been talking about how to navigate our own mortality, right? How to recognize that we are going to die, not be fearful that we're going to die, and how to maximize every moment in time. But we're missing a critical point in all this discussion. And that is that the truth is that the concept of death is actually, according to Judaism, a very bad thing. Meaning to say that we should not die at all. That's what it means. In other words, we know, as we've spoken about, that our soul lives on forever. And we've also learned that the soul can maximize its purpose and its goal while it is housed within the body. And it's only for technical reasons that the body dies. We've learned benefits from this fact that the body ultimately will die because the soul can continue to live. But if indeed it's true that the soul, while it's in the body, can maximize and grow exponentially than the soul without the body, so what we should really want is that the body should never die either. And in fact, this is the way God created the world. When God created Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, he created them that they will never die, that they should live forever. It is only because they ate from the tree of knowledge that death was introduced to the world. If they would not have eaten from the tree of knowledge, they would live forever, and so would we. So it is our fervent prayer then that we should live forever. In other words, we should come back to the times of the way the world was before the sin of the tree of knowledge. When a bride and groom gets married, we have what is called the Sheva Brachas, the 7 blessings. The 7 blessings are said under the chuppah. 7 blessings are said in the meal after the wedding, and the subsequent 7 days, the 7 blessings. And one of those blessings we say, and we wish the couple a blessing, that they should be happy like Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. And the question is always asked, has there never been a happy couple since Adam and Eve? That the only couple you can point to and say that you should be as happy as Adam and Eve, why don't you should be as happy as your grandparents or your great-grandparents or somewhere up and down in the history of your family, there has to be a happy couple. The only one you can find is Adam and Eve. Why do we go all the way back then? And there's one simple reason for that. Because Adam and Eve were the only couple in the history of mankind that did not have in-laws.
That's a very good reason.
Yeah. So back to our story here. So really what we should be asking then is, how can we come back to the times when we will live forever? So let's read this inside on page 224, text 9a. Victor, you want to read, please?
All right, thank you, Rabbi. 224?
Yeah, 9a.
Okay, thank you. God commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For on that day, for on the day that you eat from it, you will certainly die.
Before you continue, we know that Adam and Eve did not die. In fact, they lived for 930 years. Adam lived afterwards. So what is God saying? If you eat, the moment you eat from the tree, you're going to die. But he didn't die, right? That's the obvious question that everybody asks on this text. And the answer is that what he did do is introduce death to the world. He did eventually die, because by him eating from the tree of knowledge, he introduced death to the world. What does that mean? He introduced death to the world. So let's see text number 9b, please. Victor, you want to, we'll ask someone else that didn't. Galina, you want to read, please?
By the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for you were taken from it. For you are dust, and you will return to dust.
So we see clearly God is telling him, after you ate from the tree of knowledge, you will experience death and you'll be buried in the ground. From dust you came, you will return to dust. So we can conclude that from a biblical standpoint, immortality is the ideal and original state of the human being, while death is essentially a glitch in the natural order. Death then became part of the human condition with Adam and Chava's mistake of eating from the tree of knowledge, causing them to fall from their state of holiness and perfection. When we finally remedy this error and realize our true potential as human beings, death will be no more. As Yeshayahu says, what is it, something that we pray for? With the coming of Mashiach, that death will be eradicated. Let's see text number 10 on page 225. Sivan, you want ask Nick, read please.
Yeah. God will eradicate death forever and wipe the tears off every face.
Right. So what do we pray for then? We pray for the coming of Mashiach, that when Mashiach comes, we will no longer experience this time of death, this experience of death. Our bodies will be within, our bodies will house our souls, and our soul will be together with our body, live forever. How will we avoid the pitfalls of our own immortality of living forever? How will you avoid it? By not pushing things off. Because at that point, when Mashiach comes, we will be living a spiritual life, meaning to say, we will be experiencing such intense light and holiness that we're going to want to grow from level to level. We're not going to want to or have any interest in wasting our time or in physical material things. All we're going to want to do is be involved in holy and beautiful things. So let's recap here. So before body and soul, second, let me make this small. Before body and soul are in sync, the body is selfless and the body has no ego. The body's only desire is to do the will of God. This is before the sin of the eating from the forbidden tree, the forbidden fruit. There's no conflict of interest between the body and the soul. Adam is in perfect harmony, his body and soul. After the sin, the body and soul are misaligned. The body is conscious of a self or ego separate from the soul. The body is the source of selfish desires, and the body can potentially go against God's will. So as a result of this, so Adam and Eve came and they ate from the tree of knowledge. They introduced, in other words, this idea of selfishness. They introduced the idea of ego. They introduced the idea of the separation between the body and the soul. So now we have a problem. You know what the problem is? The problem is that if this idea of sin, of trouble, of selfishness has been introduced into the world, what's going to happen if the person will live forever? You know what will also live forever? Ego, self-centeredness, bad habits. And we don't want that to live forever. So therefore, this concept that God introduced when Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, what does that mean? They introduced evil into the world, right? They introduced good and bad. Good is good, but they also introduced bad. So now that we have bad that is mixed in with the good, it's impossible, or it will be completely wrong for the human being to live forever, because that means that the bad that is mixed in with them will also live forever. So therefore, automatically, death was introduced into the world. So now when we die, the bad will end. But you know what does not end? Good does not end. When you do a good deed today, years after you die, that good deed is still felt. But when we mistreat somebody, that feeling goes away after you die. In other words, badness, selfishness does not continue to live. Selflessness continues to live. So the introduction of death into the world was actually a gift that God gave us. So the evil or the bad that is mixed in with the good will not live forever. But when Mashiach comes and evil will be eradicated from the world, there will only be goodness and pleasure. Spirit, meaning to say spiritual pleasure, holiness in the world. There'll be no more selfishness, no more ego. Then automatically there'll be no need for death. Because the only reason why there's death is to stop the evil from continuing forever. But once there's no more evil, there's no need to have death. So Mashiach comes, there won't be any more death. Does this make sense? It's an amazing concept if you think about it. Because the only reason why you have death is because it's intertwined, the bad and the good. But once we separate it, in other words, once we can identify this is good, this is bad, the bad is gone. Mashiach's here, we no longer have anything to do with any evil. Only goodness will be perpetuated. Then there's no need for death. We can live forever. Why do we push off from doing the right thing? Because of our godly soul? No, it's because our animal soul wants us to do the bad thing, right? Or push off the good thing. But if you ever meet someone who's purely good, I don't know if it's even possible because everyone has good and bad mixed in with them. But in theory, if you meet someone that's perfectly good, they would never push off the opportunity to do something good. You give them a chance to do it right away. This idea of time, procrastination, does not exist in someone that is completely good. It only exists when we have an evil inclination or a bad habit within us, a bad behavior. So when Mashiach comes, we'll have no longer will we be tempted or interested in doing anything bad. So there'll be no need for death. So death will be eradicated. Let's see text 11 inside, please. Leon, do you want to read, please? Leon.
Okay. The condition of death that was introduced to the world through the sin of the tree of knowledge was a natural consequence of the very sin itself. To explain, life is associated exclusively with holiness, and holiness, on the other hand, is death. As a result of the sin of the tree of knowledge, unholiness, spiritual death, mingled with the human identity from which the condition of physical death is a natural eventual consequence.
Right. Exactly like we just read. So is death a bad thing? No, death is a separation of the mortal body from the immortal soul. But the moment we realize that spiritual death is when body and soul are separated because of the misaligned values and desires. However, when there's no longer misaligned desires and values, there's no need for death. And therefore then, we live forever. So before Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, there was no separation between the physical world, the body, and its godly purpose, the soul. Our job then is to rectify the damage and realign everything with its purpose. And we do so by ignoring the superficial layers of the thing and instead focus on its inner truth and purpose. And eventually, all physicality becomes alive. And this is why there's a major discussion or argument or disagreement between the sages. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? Will this idea that we learn about, that Maimonides talks about, that there will be a resurrection of the dead. When Mashiach comes, everybody will be resurrected. Our loved ones will be resurrected. Will this resurrection of the dead be souls without bodies or souls within bodies? Will we just see souls floating around, or will it be a soul within the body? According to what we just explained, it must be souls within the body, because ultimately it is that connection and the realignment that the body has with the soul. So the soul can function on a very high spiritual level with the body, when the body is not being an obstacle for the soul's ultimate mission. Therefore, Maimonides says it will be souls within the body. Yeah.
Will the body be repaired?
Repaired? Yes. And so Jim is asking, will the body be repaired? And the answer is absolutely. That when Mashiach comes, all illness will also be eradicated. Remember, there's not going to be any bad or evil or any harmful components in the world. So the body will be healed. The only question is, when someone is resurrected, will they be resurrected at the age that they died or in a youthful resurrection? So for that, we'll have to wait and see. There's no consensus on that amongst the sages. But the idea that there'll be the resurrection, the body within the soul, again, is also something that is, we'll have to wait and see. But according to Maimonides, and this is the way the Lubavitcher Rebbe understood it also, based upon what we just learned, that it will be a body within the soul. A soul within the body. So as much, let's read text number 12, please. Page 227. Jim, you want to read, please?
The resurrect.
Question. Yeah, we do have a question.
Go ahead. You got it?
Yeah, I just can't read with the mask on. The resurrection of the dead is the foundation of the Torah of Moses. One cannot maintain a connection to the Jewish religion and the Jewish nation without this belief.
So as such, notwithstanding all that we have learned in this course, the ultimate answer to death is not its explanation or its justification or a better understanding of the dynamics of the journey of the soul. It is death's abolishment completely. Resurrection of the dead is the actualization of the sinking of the body and soul, the ultimate purpose of creation. And the ultimate answer to death is not its explanation or justification, it's its abolishment. Okay, we have a question here. Go ahead.
If we are reincarnated, how will the soul know which body?
It's an excellent question. So based upon last week's discussion about reincarnation, the idea of reincarnation is not that the entire soul comes down into the next person. It is a part of the person, not taking away from the original person. So it's that new person, the new personality has been created from the original one that is being reincarnated. Let's see text number 13, please, on page 228. This is the final reading of this course. I think everyone had a chance to read. Looks like it. Annie there? She want to read? No? Okay. All right.
I will read, Rabbi. This is Rivka.
Okay. Oh, Rivka, go ahead. I didn't see you, so I don't see your name. Thank you. Please read.
Yeah, it's okay. So what is the reincarnated souls, or the one that says?
A kernel of consolation. Text 13.
Oh, okay. A kernel of consolation is captured in the traditional hallowed statement of consolation that has been used to comfort mourners by tens of generations of our nation's communities that follow the Torah tradition. May the Omnipotent console you among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. At first glance, the association of those two concepts, Jerusalem's destruction and personal loss, is perplexing. The reality, however, is that we have perfect confidence that Hashem will reveal the ruins of Zion and Jerusalem. He will gather the dispersed remnants of Israel for the ends of the earth through the righteous Mashiach, and he will bring them in gladness to witness the joy of Zion and Jerusalem. We are equally confident that the same is true with regard to our personal bereavement. Hashem will fulfill his promise that those that dwell in the dust shall awake in joyful sing. Great indeed will be the happiness and rejoicing then. when all will meet together after the resurrection of the dead.
Thank you. So Mashiach comes, this is the ultimate that we can't wait for this idea and the moment, the time of the resurrection of the dead. And this is something we're going to discuss a little more in the next course when we talk about what this idea of Mashiach is, the Jewish Messiah, the time of Messiah, the person of Messiah, what exactly is the Judaism believe in this as it relates to us and how it impacts our life today. With this, I want to thank you for joining in today's lesson, but most importantly, an entire course. I'm sorry that the course has come to an end, but don't worry, we're going to continue learning other concepts, other ideas, and fascinating insights into Jewish life. I want to thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And it so happens that tomorrow we're doing our annual fundraising campaign. So look out for the emails. Hopefully we can get 100% participation, everyone in this class. And any questions, please, if you have any questions now, we'll stand for a few minutes and try to answer any questions that we have.
I have one, Rabbi.
Okay, go ahead.
So with the reincarnation of the soul and then how you come back to fulfill the mitzvahs, and then with the resurrection, is the concept more along the lines of it's the soul's resurrection because the soul, different parts keep on reincarnating and purifying after they achieve what the mitzvahs are.
Okay.
So how do they
We can hear someone, we can hear the question.
So is there a specific pathway or the identity of that? So the soul in itself, because it keeps on getting purified. In the resurrection, it wouldn't be as ourselves, but as the soul. Is that right? Like our sense of identity. So it wouldn't be us physically as we are now, but it would be a new reincarnation of it.
So according to my understanding of the time of resurrection of the dead, is that when we resurrect, so at that point, because of the era of the messianic era we're going to be in, our souls will have reached its perfection. Okay. So then it can come into the body as we are now. Okay. So the only reason why it has not come is because we have not reached the moment of perfection. The whole idea of Mashiach is that we've finished correcting the world. Right. That's why we do all these good things to try to correct the world. I was saying that the answer is on page 240 in the appendix. Thank you very much. Okay, good. All right, thank you. Any other questions?